Welcome to the Predictable Revenue Podcast, where sales leaders teach you what's working for them so you can build it yourself.
This episode of the Predictable Revenue Podcast is brought to you by our sales coaching and consulting services. Are you looking to create repeatable, scalable, and predictable revenue? We've helped thousands of companies grow their business with tailored expert advice backed by testing to ensure they establish the best practices that will work for them. Head over to bit.ly/predictable coaching to learn more.
Help me understand what are the parts? How do you break down a cold call script? Is it just do you script everything out? Is it like line by line? Is it sections? Talk me through that process.
Yeah, so the way I always start with helping folks build cold calling script is the first half is going to be pretty much completely scripted. And the second half is where it's sort of, you got to be on your feet, ready for what the prospect says. But the first half, you have your opener, that should be fairly consistent all the time. The simple one I use, hey, this is Drew with Orum. Happy Friday, happy Wednesday, or good afternoon, good morning. Very rarely does someone respond poorly to good afternoon. It's an odd response. Post that, you either have sort of your permission-based opener or your value prop. I always go into the reason why I'm calling. So yeah, just to preface why I'm reaching out, saw you were title over at company, had a few sales reps over you or whatever relevant if you had, and was hoping to intro Orum if you had a second. Yeah, I got a second too. Now, if they say no, you know what's coming up. It's always the I'm busy objection, which is the easiest objection to handle. So you know what's coming if they do say no. Assuming they say yes, that's when you go into your value prop. Now, building a value prop, I think is super important for hooking the prospect. And the goal of the value prop is to, in one or two succinct sentences, tell them what you do and answer the question, what do I get? So to answer that, I think you need to connect the value prop to positive business outcomes. The three, some people say there's four positive business outcomes: increase revenue, decrease cost, decrease risk. Some would argue for increased efficiency. Usually that goes back down to revenue or cost. But I think that there a lot of times some folks will think they have a positive business outcome, but it's not filtered down enough. So, for example, increase forecast accuracy. There's a client I was working with yesterday, and that was the crux of their value prop. Well, increasing forecast accuracy isn't a positive business outcome. So we need to attach to one of those three things that I just mentioned before. So the real business outcome was reducing operational costs, and we put a percentage to that. That's a hook where the prospect says, what do I get? Well, you get a 19% decrease in operational costs. That's what you get. And then past that value prop, you ask a question. And that question, the goal of that question is to figure out their current situation. So it can be a process question, a system question. And so that part's completely scripted. You have your opener, you have your permission-based reason why you're calling, and you have your value prop connected to positive business outcomes and the question about their current situation.
Do you mind if I jump in here? Okay, so opener, reason why I'm calling, I love that. Then you kind of go, you said there's permission-based versus value prop. And the value prop is, what do I get versus what do I do versus what do you get? What's the permission-based one?
So, some people mix them into one. I personally keep them into two. So I'll just to preface why I'm calling. I saw your title at company, yada, yada, yada. Was hoping to intro us if you had a second. Yeah, I got a second. Great. Then there's the value prop. Or some people we'll make that into one, and then they're opposed to asking if they can intro, they'll just go straight into the current situation question.
Love that. And then you said, if they say no, this is the easiest objection, which is I'm busy. So how do you overcome the I'm busy objection?
Yeah. So the I'm busy objection is super simple, is lead with empathy and acknowledge, just like everything else. So yeah, totally get it. Hey, can I ask one question to see if it's even worth following up? Almost 95% of the time, people will say yes. And then basically succinct value prop, current situation question, same thing. So the first goal of the first question goal should be their current situation, so current systems, processes. Same exact thing with the value prop, understanding that they might be wanting to sort of get off the phone, so maybe make it a little bit quicker if it's longer. And then your whole goal is just to find someone to pitch against. Once you get past that, you ask them that first question about their current situation. It can sound like, just out of curiosity, do you have anything in place for whatever you do? Or do you have reps doing this activity that they would do on your platform? Figure out where they're at first, because if you don't know what they're doing now, it's pretty hard to pitch against it, and the person's it's like you're just pitch slapping somebody. So it can be a little bit awkward, I think. But once you get past that current situation question and they tell you what it is, the big key, I think, after their initial response is to ask a second level question. So they're probably going to give you some sort of general response about what they're doing. A good question framework, actually, Jeremy, my manager, just shared with me. It's called the Ted Williams question framework. It's basically can you walk me through? Can you share with me? Can you tell me? It's a good start to an open-ended question framework. Or can you expand for me? So if they say something and your reaction is, well, that's close, but not exactly what I was looking for, I sort of would like to know a little bit more. I think you can ask something along the lines, you mentioned X, can you expand upon that a little bit, and get them to make that a little bit bigger so you understand what's actually going on. Once you actually understand where they're at now, first goal of the cold call is complete. Secondly, you want to reaffirm what business outcomes they get. So you're re-answering the question, what do I get? So it's going to be very similar to what you said in the value prop. Sometimes I repeat the same thing. Maybe if there's something they said in the current situation, I'll shift it slightly. And then, so you're basically using those positive business outcomes as bait, sort of like you're fishing with the positive business outcomes. And then, you just call to action after that. You're basically asking, hey, here's your current situation. I understand I've worked with people with this current situation. They received this outcome. Is this an outcome you would be interested in? Some of the good call to actions I like, because at first when you're cold calling, it can be sort of hard to figure out how to hinge. First off, I think less is more. You don't need to talk nearly as much as you think to have a call to action be successful. Over talking, I think, kills a lot more cold calls than under talking. So it could sound something along the lines of, basically just want to recap. Literally recap. Don't make anything new up. Recap what was just said. So yeah. So it sounds like you're using this, you're using that. You're currently getting this outcome with my platform. You're going to be able to increase revenue, decrease cost, decrease risk, whatever the business outcome is. So I think a firm that you'll think it'll be useful to them to look at. So I think this would be useful for you to check out. Would you be open to scheduling a call maybe Thursday or Friday? I have 3 or 4. Do either of those times work for you? So you're asking a question. We could do like Thursday or Friday if that would work for you, and then immediately you just go to the time. I could do 3 or 4. Would either of those times work for you? So your final question they're actually answering is a or, not an if.
I like it. It's interesting. In an email, I would say I would never ever let you say that, because it's like 3 questions all in one sentence.
Right.
But it's kind of the assumptive close. If you want to say yes, I'm just going to save us the back and forth of like, does it make sense? Cool. Now we move to scheduling. You're just assuming we're going to go to scheduling. If they want to, what if they say no?
So that's when your objection handling skills come into play. So there's a really good objection handling framework that actually the CEO of Orum was when I was first introduced to it. Basically, there's a framework that I sort of half came up with, half mixed with his. But the one I use is called the AAA framework, which is acknowledge, add value, ask a question. The one thing Jason adds to that is after you acknowledge, double down on the risk that they just said. So if they say no, let's say, yeah, it sounds great, but we just don't have budget. Acknowledge, yeah, totally get it. A lot of teams are low on budget, and then you want to double down on the risk so it could sound something like, no one wants to buy a tool, it becomes shelfware, the reps don't use it. So you're basically complaining for them a little bit, or trying to.
If we've listened to Never Split the Difference or read Never Split the Difference, this is the accusation audit saying, hey, I don't want to spend any money. And you're like, yeah, totally fair. You probably have 100 sales tools and your team's probably not even using half of them. You don't want to add another one to the stack. And then you get to them to agree to that. Now we've hit acknowledge, double down, now add value. So how do we add value after the accusation audit?
So the hinge phrase I like to use is one thing I may add, and sort of in that tone. One thing is double down. You're not going to use it. It's going to be shelfware. Yada yada. One thing I may add is, folks, with your exact current situation, call whatever you discovered in the rest of your cold call, and then you need some other insight that you haven't already brought up that they might find interesting. If it's tailor it around the specific objection. So if it's budget, maybe you're able to find that budget, you're able to pull it from a different department or something. Like one thing Orum is able to do is a lot of times pull it from headcount budget opposed to tech spend. The one other objection you could do is objection handle is sort of the education general objection handle. And I learned this actually from Ali Brotherton over here at Orum. And basically what it is, I totally understand, whether it's budget, competition, whatever it is. I totally understand, double on the risk. One thing I may add, we do this unique thing on our demos. So the phrase is water under the bridge, or worst case scenario, you'll learn a new thing or two about whatever you do. So I think it'll still be useful. Worst case scenario, you learn something new. Would you be able to just checking it out? No pressure. I could do like Thursday at 3 if that would work. Call to action again. So you're sort of releasing the pressure. Yeah, I totally get it. It's probably not a good time. You don't have budget. You're working with somebody else. I mean, worst case scenario, you learn something new, right? So you sort of know what's out there. Call to action.
We'll just say a lot. I thought there are typical responses that I get. I'm curious, what are your kind of top ones? And do you have like pre-scripted ways or insights of handling those?
So I think you can organize them into 2 different categories. You have your brush off objections, and then you have your legitimate objections. The brush offs are, I'm busy, I'm in a meeting, I can't talk, I'm not interested, sorry, surprise, sorry, who is this? How did you get my number? Things like that. For the most part, I handle those with the I'm busy objection. Yeah, totally. I know I caught you cold. That's a really good phrase. I know I caught you cold. Can I ask just one question to see if it's even worth following up? I use that every single time for almost every single brush off. Even if immediately send me an email. Yeah, I can't send you an email. I know I caught you cold. Can I just ask one question to see if it's even worth sending that email in the first place? You can get around pretty much every brush off with that objection handle.
I'm sure you fucked up enough of your plenty of cold calls and objection handles where they've gone poorly to kind of get here.
Definitely. Well, it's been useful because I've sold multiple products. So I've sort of, if you're just selling one, you can get good at selling that product, but you might not understand like the actual structure and what the behind the scenes are. I just understand that one value prop, but if you can understand multiple, then you can understand any product is sort of the same. You just got to plug in different variables. It was like a math equation. But on the other side of the objections, it's going to depend on your product, which ones are most common. But budget, competition, I'm not the decision maker, or I'm the wrong person. Let's focus on those three for now. So budget, same thing, AAA, and acknowledge, lead with empathy. And it can be a simple, small little phrase. Yeah, I totally get it. Understand. Budgets are always pretty full. Double down on the risk with the budget. The big thing with budget is you're probably concerned you're not going to use it, or you're not going to get the return. So it's going to be wasted money. So bring those concerns up. And then one thing I may add, this one might require a little bit of pre-work, but you would probably want to go to an AE who has heard that objection, before on a deal, budget. Hey, we get budget, and then got budget. How did that happen? And then have that sort of pre-story ready to bring there, almost like a study of how to get around budget, and then call to action. So acknowledge. What was the other A?
Acknowledge, accusation, audit. You double down on the risk.
Exactly. Yeah. Accusation, audit. Add value. Ask questions.
That's a good question.
Which hinge call to action.
So you say you're cold calling me to sell me Orum, and I say I don't have the budget for it. I already use Apollo and another tool that's competing. I can't spend any more on the budget. What's the site?
Totally.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I totally hear it. I hear that all the time, especially in today's economic environment. Plus, you don't want to buy a tool that'll just sit on the shelf, or reps that may not use, especially if you have something already in place. One thing I will add is normally with folks using Apollo and whatever other tool you said, they do usually see like a 2 to 3x increase in volume of conversations, leading to more revenue, of course. So I think it might still be worth checking out if you'd be open to it. I could do like Thursday or Friday later this week at like 3 or 4, if either of those times would work for you.
So acknowledge, the one small thing I'll add, people usually see 2 to 3x the volume. And then the question is just your CTA. Is your stock CTA?
I would just send a call to action. I mean, once you're in the objection, and you already know their current situation, you don't want to keep asking more questions. You're already giving them the positive business outcome they're going to get. They brought up a concern, you quelled it, you ask again. If they bring up another concern, same process. Once you get to 3 call to actions, I mean, it's probably pretty low. You book it, but 3 call to actions is probably where after the third one, it's like, all right, so you can give them a call back later.
Yeah, I think if you get to 3 call to actions, like 3, you try and handle 3 objections on a cold call, and you're a fucking hero.
Yeah. One, if you're just able to stay calm and like go through the correct process without sort of making the prospect annoyed, that's a win in and of itself. And if you're actually able to like convey the value, get the prospect to understand that, and at the 3rd call to action to book it, is always an impressive call. But the next objection, that's I think one of the more common ones that's also important, and basically I would almost call it the enterprise objection, is I'm not the right person. Especially in larger companies, there's 15 people that could be involved in a decision. No one necessarily wants to take the risk. They don't see a personal win in even taking a demo. So they're like, I don't want to do it. Is sort of what's going in the back of your mind. And this is from Aaron Melamed, who actually also introduced me to the positive business outcomes idea. But basically what it is same thing, acknowledge. Acknowledge that there's multiple people that would be involved in this decision. Yeah, totally understand that, there'll be multiple people involved in this decision. That being said, I do think it would be worth starting with you, especially because you're most likely talking to someone who's not the NDM and you're like someone lower on the totem pole, because you're closer to the day-to-day in the weeds. So I think you would have some valuable insights there. Not looking to start a sales process or anything, bring the pressure off. Educational, Ali Brotherton, water under the bridge. You'll learn a new tip on my tool on the industry, et cetera, call to action. So to recap, acknowledge there's multiple people involved in the decision. Say, sort of empower them. I think you would be a great person to start with because you're closer to the day-to-day of the people who would actually be using this in the weeds. So your insight would be valuable. And then hinge, call to action. Great. And I actually missed a small little part there. When you say, I do think it'd be worth starting with you. If you find it interesting, then we can bring it up the chain from there. Because whoever you're talking to, their concern is, well, if it doesn't work out and then they talk to my manager, I'm going to get in trouble because they might not even know I'm taking the demo. So reconfirming that, hey, not going to go above you. If you like it, we can sort of go from there to figure out what the best way forward is.
So where does that piece fit into the script? I think it'd be good to start with because you're closest to the day-to-day. And if you find it interesting, yeah, kind of just like that.
Yep. So exactly like that. If you find it interesting, we can bring up the chain from there. So anyways, I could do like Thursday or Friday if that worked for you, like 3:00. Call to action.
For anybody who's wondering why I'm silent, it's because I'm typing so that you all don't have to. And I'll throw a link to the Google Doc in the show notes later. All right. Competition. Objection.
So competition.
Yeah. Talk to me about it.
Yeah. Competition is tricky depending on who your competitors are, because it can sort of be multiple objections into one. Sometimes it can be sort of a budget objection in there, Yeah, we just signed up for a year, 3 months ago. So, we wouldn't be looking at any type of new budget. So I don't think it's a good time for now. That's a difficult objection to overcome. So you really got to know you have to know your competitors and the differences, and then the outcomes folks will get from switching. So a lot of times it's a cost saving if you're less expensive. Or maybe it's like in Orum's case, there's like power dialers and there's parallel dialers. If you're a power dialer like Phone Burner and you switch to Orum, use parallel dialing, you're going to be able to 2 to 3x volume of conversations, revenue increase. So definitely want to know the outcomes or the differences, that the reason why they would change from the competitor, and that is now your positive business outcome you pitch against. Now, a lot of it's going to be a timing thing. You're not always going to be able to book a meeting right away. If they just signed a year contract and they're 2 months in, it doesn't really make sense to chat right now. So sometimes the best outcome is not booking a meeting next week, but 5 months down the line. Usually I found the review starts maybe 3 to 4 months before the renewal is a good time to reconvene. So that's a good time to throw something on. And for calendar, for competition, stuff like that, I don't see anything wrong with throwing it 4 months out. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I might want to send an email the week before. Now, if let's say they are 3 months from renewal, they're using a competitor, and you know the difference. You want to pitch against that outcome. So most of it is in the pre-work, knowing who your competitors are, what they do, the differences and the outcomes. Outcomes or reasons someone would switch, and then sharing that. So that's one of the more difficult ones, just because you need to be prepared. The other ones you don't necessarily be prepared for. So that's, but I would use the same framework, the quadruple A, and the risk, the accusation on it, or the risk you bring up is why anyone would not want to change. Yeah, totally get why you may not want to change. It takes a lot of lift from enablement and ops to switch up systems, data transport. You got to train the reps on the new system. That being said, my system is actually super easy to onboard and use. We have a dedicated onboarding team. Further, make sure they understand that the transition is not going to be difficult. Coupled with the outcomes they get from switching, call to action.
So if you are not cold calling consistently, you're never going to be able to hit your goals. So I'd love to understand how you organize your day. What does it look like for planning? What do your call blocks look like?
Yeah, so what I would recommend as an SDR is probably two or three, depending on your ability to make a volume of calls, 2 or 3 hour call blocks. Now, if you really want to be number one and blow it out, I would call 4 to 5 hours a day, every day. I think if you really want it, you can handle that. Now, you also have to understand when you're getting burned out, bring it back down to 2 or 3. But I think anyone can hold consistently 2 to 3 hours of calling a day. So I always like to do a morning block, or if you can start at 8 a.m. Eastern, get people on their drive or making their coffee when they're still in a good mood and hadn't hit those morning meetings. That's great. I like around lunchtime, and then I like later in the day around 3:30 or 4. And then intersperse with prospecting blocks. So making sure you have enough prospects either going into sequence, or you have enough, you have a big enough list, or maybe if you're a little bit more on the enterprise side of things, you're doing your research on those folks, or crafting a personalized email. So I would just put it in hour blocks: hour prospecting, hour calling, hour prospecting, hour calling.
How do you think about sequences? Or do you even think about sequences? Do you even know how to send an email, or do you just get 100% of your meetings from calling?
I don't even know how to spell it. I mean, my strength was always on the phone, so I didn't do a lot on the email side of things, besides like maybe an automatic email. Now there's plenty of folks that have a lot of success with, personalized first emails, having a 12-step sequence with 6 emails and 6 calls. Me personally, I send 1 automatic email and it was call only after that. So I just pretty much didn't spend any time on personalizing emails and just doubled my call time. If there was a prospect I really wanted to get in touch with and I wasn't able to get with on the phone, that's when I'd craft a good email. Now, the one time I do use email is on referrals. So there's a really good referral method. You call it a top-down referral, where you talk with someone at an upper level that refers you to a lower level, or even a sideways. And the subject line is something along the lines of, via Mike. And then there's like, hey, I chatted with Mike. He thought it would be worth setting some time for you to chat. Reason being, value prop, calendar, here's some times. So it's sort of the assumptive close as well. And that can be as simple as, Mike saying, yeah, I think Jerry is a little bit, this is more in his domain, so he's probably best to chat with. Something as simple as that, you can use that. That works very, very well. Actually, the wrong person, that's when you'd use this. But if you're looking for information, sort of like a more strategic approach, I love calling low-level people, not even looking for a meeting, just looking for information. People, processes, and systems, where your goal is just to see what you can get from them. Because then once you go to the upper level person, now you can say, hey, I know you're using this system, this process, been struggling with this a little bit. Now you have something to pitch against, so you don't have to ask them on the cold call about their current situation. You already know it. So it makes that cold call that much smoother. It shows you're prepared, you're competent, you put some effort into it. especially on the larger companies, 500,000 employees plus. So a lot of times that's what it takes. Sometimes, rarely, you may not be able to just cold call out of the blue and book a meeting. Sometimes you are, but sometimes it does require a little bit more effort there.
Like you call up an AE trying to sell Orum. What are you going to ask? Like, how do you open that up?
Yeah, so I don't know the same way as the regular call. Your preface might be a little bit different. So, hey, good morning. Yeah, good morning. Just preface by reaching out. I saw you were an AE over at X company. Was hoping to intro Orum and get your thoughts here if you had a minute. Sure, I got a minute. Awesome. So, what Orum is, or whatever your product is, does this, delivers this positive business outcome. Just out of curiosity, do you guys have anything in place for that? So sort of the same thing. Your first goals, figure out the current situation. Do you have anything in place for that? They're probably going to say, I'm not the right person. So you'll be prepared for that. So yeah, I totally understand you're not the right person. I was just hoping to get some information, so I could sort of, reach out up the chain from there. By the way, who would be in charge of evaluating tech or a software like this? So your goal is to find systems. What are they using? People who's in charge of the decision. Any other relevant processes or metrics that are impacted would be awesome. Sometimes you'll get people that are just talking away. Don't interrupt them. And they'll give you, oh, well, our connect rate's been impacted by 4% in the last 3 months. That's something, that's ammo you can bring to the exec when you cold call them. Sometimes you get lucky with those AEs or whoever it is, the adjacent titles, that one's got a good relationship with the decision maker and they're willing to make an intro, and boom, now you're in. So sometimes you get lucky too.
Love it. Talk to me about attitude. I've been in a situation where I know I'm not going to book a meeting today. And lo and behold, I didn't book a meeting that day.
Yeah. So I would say you got to not care about the outcome. It's really is. There's different personality types that I think succeed better with cold calling. The ones that care a lot about people and care how they're viewed and just have a good heart. A lot of times they don't necessarily make the best cold callers because they don't deal with the rejection as well, and they care so much. And when someone says I don't care, that's difficult. So you got to have an air of I don't care if you take this meeting or not. So that's when it comes to, you're basically just fishing with the positive business outcomes. Now, in terms of attitude, you got to control the controllables. So the activity, there's two levers. You have activity and skill. Activity you can absolutely control. So you can make a certain number of calls, or you can send a certain number of emails, irregardless of anything else. Now, on the skill side, that's up to you a lot of times. There's a lot of teams that say, oh, we have the best training team, we have the best enablement, maybe for the first 2 weeks, and then you're sort of on your own. And if your manager isn't super good at cold calling because they haven't cold called in 3 years, you might be on your own. So in terms of getting better, very similar to the role play. Find sort of the meanest person, the person you least want to talk to, everyone's sort of scared of. That's who you want. Go to them, get their advice, Slack them, email them, call them, whatever it is. They're going to be more than happy to help, most likely. Also, the top person, shadow them, hang out with them for an hour and just listen to them, and take one of your calls, send it to them. Hey, what do you think? Anything I should change, or what would you change? And you can send it to same call to 6 different people, and you'll get 6 different responses. And if you do that 3 times a week for your first 6 weeks, plus you do role plays, plus you listen to other people's calls, you'll probably be pretty good pretty quick.
I'm in a bad list. What if I'm stuck?
Mm-hmm. So if you're stuck, you got to figure out why. It's either a skill thing or an activity thing. So similar to what I just mentioned on the skill development. If it's an activity thing, you need to figure out a plan of action to get enough activity to at least give yourself a shot. If it's a skill thing, find the top rep, get their feedback, or send your call to 5 different reps, get their advice, or send it to the meanest, biggest jerk on the team. They're probably going to give you good advice. I'd probably start with that. You'll usually find they're not such a big jerk after all. So I think there's a core tech stack you need. You need a CRM, keep track of everything. It all starts with the data. You absolutely need a data tool. If you're calling, you need good cell phone numbers. You're going to need good emails as well, but I think the cell phone numbers is as important, if not more important, especially if you're in a calling first motion. Some of the tools out there, you got your Zoom Info. They're the biggest in the space, obviously. They're going to be the most expensive by a good margin, though. So you can probably buy 2 other tools for the price of the Zoom Info. You have your Seamlesses, your Sales Intel. You have your Cognisms. Then there's a tool like Apollo where it's data and an engagement platform. So I do recommend an engagement platform so you can tie emails well to it. If you're ready to call heavy motion, you don't need it. But you probably do want it if you do have budget. So data, engagement tool, dialer is the CRM. If you're on a budget, CRM, data, dialer is over an engagement tool.